Hey Zach, how are you?
Howdy, how's it going? Good to
Good.
see you.
Good to see you. To start, I love when comedians get to kind of just mess with people. It's one of my favorite things about the British one. And so I like the American one because it is not only an American sense of humor, which I know well, but it's also comedians that I know and watch their stuff. And like for you, what is the fun of switching comedy from, whether it be improv or like I always see with George Lucas versus something like this where you are being a voice for the audience while also just messing with contestants while they're trying to bake.
Yeah, it's fun. One of the most fun things is figuring out how to have fun with each contestant because, they're not necessarily people who are performers or who have even been on camera before. So they all kind of have a different style. So we have to slowly tease that out of them over the course of the season. So I'd say that's the most fun part for me, like figuring out like, okay, this person is happy doing like silly bits, so I can go over and like really play around with them. This person is a little more focused. So maybe I kind of like leave the nonsense out of their station. Yeah, that I really enjoy that part. Just like figuring out how to play with everyone.
Yeah, does it help or does any of them do? Because I saw this on Twitter and it made me laugh because like I said, I've been watching you do comedy for forever, but now everyone is labeling you as that guy and things. Has that changed at all throughout the seasons of the Great American Baking Show? And has anyone been like, oh yeah, I know like and notice you from all these different things that you kind of pop up in?
A little bit, a little bit. Specifically because the first thing I shot for the Great American Baking Show was the celebrity special from 2 years ago, and Marshawn Lynch was like, "Oh, hey, you're that dude from that thing," and I was like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." But yeah, some of the contestants know me from stuff, some not, but usually I'd say like after we've been in the tent together for like 2 days, they're such like long weird days, it becomes this very like we're just in this together, trying to like survive this basically.
And what is it like with Prue and Paul? Because I was talking to Prue yesterday, and a lot of her comments were about like Americans do this differently. And then she said something about like, oh yeah, like people will recognize the comedians, but she's like, I haven't seen anything they did. To which I said, you should watch Happy Endings. Casey's great happy endings. But like, how is it like with them? Was there like a learning curve to kind of figure out where you could mess with those two?
Definitely, they're both very good sports, which helps, and they're
Hmm.
also very uh they're like such television pros by now, like they've been doing it for so long, so they can pretty much handle anything. Do they always know what we're talking about? No. Do we always know what they're talking about? Certainly not. But it has been fun because it's a cultural thing. It's also, I think, a little bit of generational thing. Like, I remember, I think this season I learned that Prue had been to McDonald's twice in her whole life. And I was just like, oh, so we've just had a very, very different life, you know? But we're still able to have a lot of fun together. And they are both really, really good sports, which makes it very easy.
Yeah, she talked a lot about the sugar and like how we just put a lot of
Mhm.
stuff on our thing. And I was like, yeah, that makes it taste better. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know what
sugar and portion sizes are certainly something that comes up a lot.
because I was like, yeah, sugar's great, dude.
Yeah.
But also with a show like this, I mean, the obvious question is like, how much did you watch? Like the original one, all that kind of stuff. But I also really like the idea of how Americans differ in the tent versus the British. Have you noticed any of that on your end, like being in the actual tent? And like, or like, were you like, I've never seen the Great British Bake Off. I'm just doing this on my own.
No, I had seen it. I have not, I'm not a completist, but I had seen it and watched it and enjoyed it. Um, and then when I got there, you know what's interesting? I think they do such a great job casting, and also so many of the bakers on the American show are huge fans of the British show. So I do think it's been fairly tonally similar in terms of like they're all people who love baking more than anything and are really excited to be around other bakers. So it's this very fun, just like gentle vibe that you also get from the British version. I think where it mostly differs is literally in like talking about temperatures in Fahrenheit versus Celsius, different measurements like that. And then in like specific references, I think at one point um on the first season, a contestant made a cake that looked like a deep dish pizza, and Paul was like, "That doesn't look like a pizza to me," and all the Americans were like, "That is exactly what a deep dish pizza looks like." So there are little moments like that, but I'd say in terms of like essence, it's been very, very similar.
Wait, because Prue yesterday was like, we had a pizza episode, which felt weird because no one makes their own pizzas. And I was like, Americans love to make our own pizzas.
Yeah, we did a pizza challenge this season, and it was interesting, the differences. And we did burgers last season, same thing. It's
Yeah.
like it's those little differences, but in terms of like how they are in the 10, I feel like it is pretty similar.
Oh, that's awesome. And then I do want to ask this just because they don't have to be bakers. I don't care. But because you have worked on so many things and you are now officially everybody's that guy, who, whether it be a comedian or just an actor in general, would you want to see do a celebrity version of this just to see what they're like in the tent in those high pressure situations?
You know, uh John Turturro, I work with on the show Severance, and he loves cooking. I don't know how much he bakes, but we've talked about his passion for cooking before, and I would love to see him in the tent. I think he would take it very, very seriously,
Mhm.
and really do well.
He's Italian. He'd be fine.
I
He
think he would. I think he would do great.
you can navigate it. But you also like you co-hosted with Ellie Kemper, and now you're doing it with Casey. How much fun is it to kind of like bounce off another comedian in those situations, or how much of it is just kind of you going up on your own and getting to mess with people?
It's super fun, and it's super fun that all three of us have come from the sort of like improv
Mhm.
sketch comedy world. So, I had worked with Ellie very briefly before we hosted this together. Casey, I had never even met before, but there's such a just like immediate shared language and shared, we're just on the same page comedically, that is very fun. And it's definitely more fun the moments where we get to interact together versus when I'm kind of flying solo.
Yeah, and because I was talking about Noel, who does the British one yesterday, and I was like, yeah, but he's old Greg. But that is weird British sketch comedy versus American sketch comedy, which I do think is very like not aggressive, but we stick to the A to C of things very like succinctly. But does that improv training and like UCB and how they kind of taught us to hear what someone's saying and then like take it 3 steps forward, does that help you in like in the with those contestants who maybe aren't like don't mess with me that much?
I'd say the way it helps the most is just in my comfort level, because I've done so much performing where I have no idea what's going to happen next, that interacting with someone who maybe is not a comedian, to me is equal. It's the same as interacting with a comedian who's been doing it for years. I kind of have the same approach, and I know we'll like find something fun together. So I'd say that's where it mostly comes into play.
Yeah, Nat, you mentioned this season has pizza, last season had burgers. Is there like the food that is succinctly like a very American thing that you are excited for this show to eventually make all of these contestants try their hand at?
That's interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's a baking show, so like my first thought is hot dogs,
That's
but
what I
they could make buns. Like for burgers, it was they made the
yeah.
buns, so that would be fun.
For my
like a
brain went. I
Fourth
was
of July type of thing.
I
Yeah,
like that is so American that both of us were like, think it's a hot dog.
I mean, yeah. I don't know what else.
Because I was like, it
It's
is
like we
bacon.
already did pizza and burgers, so
Do a hot dog, maybe make some fries. Um,
yeah.
but for my last question, I do, I want to bring it to George Lucas just because that's where I feel like you and I've actually met and got to know each other. If you had to see, Connor Ratliff's George Lucas and Griffin Newman's Watto in the tent, how do you think that either of those two would end up faring in a baking competition?
So for those who don't know, the George Lucas
Yeah.
talk show is a talk show hosted by the comedian Connor Ratliff, where he pretends to be George Lucas. I've done the show many times. I think they would do terribly, because every time I do their show, there are full stretches of 5 or more minutes where neither of them are maybe even on stage. They just like walk away and want, so I have a feeling they would maybe not even complete their bakes if they were doing it in character. But I would love to see it. I think it would be fascinating.
Yeah, I think it would be great. And also, just because, as you said, sometimes they talk to each other and don't realize that there are other people on stage. I think the Severance one, you three just sat there.
100%. There are times where I basically end up hosting the show because Connor has taken a phone call and Griffin has walked away.
Yeah,
So
walk
it would
away.
be interesting to see them try to accomplish something that has very strict time limits. I don't know how well they would do.
I don't think it would work, but I want to see it. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for talking with me. I love this show and I can't wait for Severance and all the other stuff you're doing. So thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you. Yeah.
Good seeing you.
Bye. Yeah. Nice talking to you.